Hi guys, Olive here today to bring you my spring book haul. Library book sales are going strong here in Pittsburgh right now. I recently took a trip to Half Price Books and sold some of my older copies, books I've already read, for credits, and then I got some new books with that credit, as you do. I've ordered some books online. For some reason, I've been sent a lot of unsolicited advanced copies lately in the mail, so there have been a number of books coming into this room over the past few months, and as I always do, I've plucked all the ones that remind me of the springtime, and those are the ones I'm going to show you in today's book haul. So let's get into it. Normally I divide the books in my book hauls into fiction and nonfiction, start off by discussing novels, and then move into talking about all of the nonfiction. But for whatever reason, the way this haul worked out, it made a lot more sense to me to group them by topic. So that's what I did. The first book I have to show you, though, is a novel. It's the Book of the Month Club edition of You're Invited by Amanda J. Atisa. I find a lot of Book of the Month Club editions at library book sales. I think people get them, read them, and then donate them. And that works out very well for me. In this book, we follow the main character who gets an invite to the wedding of her erstwhile best friend. But then she finds out that the groom is her own ex-boyfriend. So our main character decides to go to the wedding, and she wants to stop this wedding by any means necessary. I myself am going to 2 different weddings this spring. I'm not looking to stop either one of them. I'm very happy they both are happening. It's just that I have weddings on my mind right now, so I think that's why I thought of the springtime when I saw this book. But speaking of friends, the next couple of books I have to show you have to do with friends, and the first one is because it was sent to me by a friend of mine. Andreea from Infinite Text was kind enough to send me a copy of Novel Destinations, and this is a travel guide that talks about places that are significant to literature in one way or another. So authors' former houses, places where they wrote their books, museums, places that inspire different works of literature, things along those lines. This book gives information about all those different places that you yourself can go and visit. I had made a video not too long ago about my bookish bucket list, and one of the items on that list is to partake in some literary tourism. And I'm assuming that's why Andreea sent this to me. This is so thoughtful. This is definitely something I'm going to be using when I plan some of my future trips. Then the other book I have to show you that relates to friendship is one I was sent unsolicited by Spiegel and Grau, which is one of my favorite publishers. That book is called Other People's Words: Friendship, Loss, and the Conversations That Never End by Lissa Soap. This is a memoir about how this author lost 2 very good friends of hers very closely together in time. And in the decade following both of their deaths, she found herself in very deep and meaningful conversations with the surviving friends and loved ones of those 2 friends that she lost. So this is a memoir about loss itself, but it's also about the language that we all use about loss. This sounds both beautiful and sad. But Spiegel and Grau also sent me a review copy of another one of their upcoming titles. It's called Shanghai Landers by Julie Min. This one comes out in May, and it's about a super rich family who lead a very unique, very international life that their wealth affords them. We start off in the year 2040, but this book is unique because it goes backward in time. We go back to 2014 to see what the family was like back then, to get a hint of how they got to where they are at the start of this novel. This one sounds so interesting. I'm really glad they sent this to me. Next up, I have another novel, but this is one I actually picked out for myself. It is called Kitchens of the Great Midwest by J. Ryan Straddle. And in this book, the main character is a girl, later a woman, who has a remarkable palate and a love for food. And we follow her over most of her life. We see her from when she was abandoned by her mother as a child, all the way up to her becoming a celebrity chef. I have heard amazing things about this book. But that actually leads me very nicely into talking about all the rest of the books on food that I have to show you in this book haul, including The Dirty Life, a memoir of farming, food, and love by Kristen Kimball. And in this book, the author talks about how she left her life in New York City to marry a farmer and start a highly ambitious farm in Essex, New York. And I think she wrote a follow-up memoir after this one, so I'll have that to look forward to if I like this first installment. Another food memoir I picked up is called Tender at the Bone: Growing Up at the Table by Ruth Reichel. And this is the famous food writer's story of her early life. life, being raised by a mother with some mental health challenges, how a number of figures in her young life would go on to shape how she saw food, how she thought about food, how she would write about food later on in her life. I read and loved Garlic and Sapphires last year. I already owned a copy of Comfort Me with Apples, which is another one of her memoirs, but I didn't have this one. So when I saw this copy at the last library book sale I went to, I grabbed it because I know I'm going to want to read more of her work here very soon. The next food book I have to show you, I actually bought this brand new, which is kind of a rarity for me. I don't buy very many brand new hardcovers, but I felt inspired to in this case because I've heard so many amazing things about Invitation to a Banquet, the story of Chinese food by Fuchsia Dunlop. And this is a tour through Chinese cuisine, but also somewhat through Chinese history, through discussions of 30 different Chinese dishes. I am so excited to read this. Since I mentioned Andreea from Infinite Text earlier, I will also mention that she's the one who gave me the heads up about this next book. She saw it and she sent it to me because she said it struck her as an olive book, and I definitely agreed. So I ordered myself a copy of In the Devil's Garden, A Sinful History of Forbidden Food by Stuart Lee Allen. This is a book that sits at the intersection of food and world religions, because it talks about certain foods that specific scriptures deem to be sinful, and then the entire book is organized into sections that are named for the 7 deadly sins. This seems so salacious, absolutely fascinating. But coming to the defense of food is Michael Pollan in his book, In Defense of Food, An Eater's Manifesto. This book seems to be a continuation of the discussion that he had in his very famous book, The Omnivore's Dilemma, which I just read, so it is still very fresh in my mind. In The Omnivore's Dilemma, he dissected the American way of eating and spoke about the problems that are found within our food system. And in this book, he seems to give the antidote, the way that we can fix some of those problems, especially in our own diets. I'm thinking, because of this cover, that his mantra, eat food, not too much, mainly plants, may have originated in this book. Moving away from food writing and moving into science and nature books, at a library book sale, I found a copy of The Man Who Found the Missing Link, Eugene Dubois and His Lifelong Quest to Prove Darwin Right by Pat Shipman. And this is a biography of a brilliant Dutch anatomist and physician who went out in search of the link between apes and man, and found it. This couldn't be one of my book hauls if there weren't some nature books included. The first two I have to show you, I actually got the same night. I got them both at an author event at White Whale Bookstore here in Pittsburgh, which is a great one to visit if you're ever in Pittsburgh. But Erica Hauser was actually in town to promote her new book, The Age of Deer, Trouble and Kinship with Our Wild Neighbors. This was one of my most anticipated releases of this quarter, so I was thrilled to see that she was coming to Pittsburgh so I could pick it up from White Whale. This is a natural and cultural history of deer and our relationship with them over the centuries. She read from this book during the event. It sounds absolutely fabulous. But then the author who was in conversation with Erica Hauser that night during the author event was Andrew Moore, and White Whale had copies of his book available for purchase as well, so I decided to pick up a copy of Pawpaw, In Search of America's Forgotten Fruit. And this is about the largest edible fruit native to the United States that I hear tastes like a blend of banana and mango. I can't believe I've never tried one before, and I can't believe I had never even heard of this book before the event. The next nature book I have to show you is actually a novel, and it's one that I first heard about as I was preparing to make that 2 books on turtles video I made last year. It sounded so interesting, I just had to order myself a used copy of it. It's called Timothy, or Notes of an Abject Reptile by Verlyn Klinkenborg. And in this book, the author takes on the perspective of a pet tortoise who was kept as a pet for 13 years by an 18th century English curate. This sounds highly unique, but absolutely delightful. And so does Running with Sherman, how a rescue donkey inspired a ragtag group of runners to enter the craziest race in America by Christopher McDougall. And in this book, the author talks about how he rescued a donkey from an animal hoarder. And in order to help that donkey heal and start doing normal donkey things again, he decided to teach the donkey how to run. And eventually, that led to the two of them entering this race, this special race intended for humans and donkeys to participate in together. This sounds positively heartwarming. This also wouldn't be one of my spring book hauls if there weren't some bird books included, and I do in fact have a smattering of them again this year. The first one is called The Bird Name Book by Susan Myers, and this is a gorgeous illustrated compendium of bird names arranged alphabetically, and we get histories of how these birds received those names. This seems like just the perfect book to continue to fuel my addiction to the Wingspan game. You don't even want to know how many hours I have logged into the digital edition. But I also got The Birds of Heaven, Travel with Cranes by Peter Matheson, which is by the author of The Snow Leopard, a book that I really enjoyed. In this book, he talks about his travel to 5 different continents where the remaining 15 species of cranes reside. And along the way, he teaches us, his readers, all about those cranes. Another book I picked up about a specific type of bird is called Spix's Macaw, The Race to Save the World's Rarest Bird by Tony Juniper. And this book tells the thrilling story of a parrot species that was nearly driven to extinction. And it's apparently this species of parrot that inspired the main character of the animated film Rio. Then I got one more that focuses on one specific type of bird. It is called Rare Bird, Pursuing the Mystery of the Marbled Murrelet by Maria Mudruth. These birds are rotund little seabirds that this author absolutely fell in love with and wrote this book as a result. It is all about how the mystery of where they nest and how they care for their young was solved, but it's also about the political and legal fight that was required to protect their habitat. I've heard the writing in this one is fantastic. It is such a niche topic, meaning that it is directly up my alley. A more general book about birds I got is called The Private Lives of Public Birds, Learning to Listen to the Birds Where We Live by Jack Gedney, which is a collection of 15 different essays about more common birds and how essential they are. Then there's Avian Illuminations, A Cultural History of Birds by Berea Sachs, which is another heavy and heavily illustrated book that provides a sweeping overview of the place of birds within human culture. The last book about birds that I have to show you in this book haul is called The Most Perfect Thing, Inside and Outside a Bird's Egg by Tim Burkhead. I've been wanting to read this book since I read and reviewed The Falcon Thief by Joshua Hammer, which is also a great book that references this one, hence why it made me want to pick up this book. I watch a lot of nest cams this time of year. I know that fact probably does not surprise you. So when I saw this book, which is all about the natural marvels that are birds' eggs, I saw this at a library book sale, so I knew it was coming home with me. But speaking of breakable objects, I also got this UK edition of A Million Little Pieces by James Fry. This is a memoir about the author's experiences with drug addiction that was hyped up by Oprah in the early 2000s until it was revealed that this author had made up a lot of the events in this book, so it was much more fiction than nonfiction, which is how it had been marketed. There was a whole big scandal about it, and during Nonfiction November, I made a TikTok recalling that scandal and talking about this book and everything that happened back then, and I got so many comments about the scandal, about this book. Some people said that they loved the book. They didn't care if it ended up being more untrue than true, while other people felt very betrayed by the author because he portrayed these events to have been real life things, and it turned out that he wasn't being honest about that. So some people felt some sort of way about it. I was too young to read this book when it was first released. I knew about the scandal, but I hadn't read it myself because I was quite young to be reading about this kind of stuff at the time. But ever since making that TikTok, I've been curious to go and read this myself. I thought it might be fun to read it myself, see what I think, revisit the scandal. I was thinking about making a video about it, and then I saw this really cool edition at a library book sale. So I feel like I have to now. The last book I have to show you in this book haul is one that made its way in here in honor of baseball season kicking off here very soon. It is a novel called The Cactus League by Emily Nemens. This is literary fiction set in the American Southwest. A star outfielder is in spring training in the state of Arizona, and we basically follow all of these different characters in his orbit until we slowly start to realize how they're all connected. So interconnected characters plus sports. this seems like something I'm really going to enjoy. So those are all the books that I've picked up recently that remind me of the springtime. If you've read any of these, if you have your own thoughts about them, if you want to give me recommendations of which ones I should prioritize, let me know any or all of that down in the comment section below. All the books that I did show you today will be listed and linked in the description box below for your clicking convenience. And at the very bottom of the exact same description box, you'll also see links to everywhere you can find me around the internet. Goodreads, Instagram, the Story Graph, all the places I'm the most active, in case you want to keep up with what I'm reading and doing right now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.